Narrative. It was a Friday evening when I walked into what I thought was my home and discovered it had been transformed into a courtroom. 4 women sat in a perfect semicircle in my living room, each holding a notebook like they were conducting a board meeting. My wife sat slightly apart from them, hands folded, wearing the kind of serious expression you'd see at a funeral. The coffee table had been moved aside, extra chairs brought in from the kitchen. Even the lighting seemed different, more formal, more intimidating. "Welcome home," my wife said, her voice carrying none of the warmth I was used to. "We need to talk." I set down my work bag, slowly, taking in the scene. Clara would sat directly across from where my usual spot would be. Next to her was Amber Farrell, my wife's workout partner. Then Kinsley Mason, the neighbor from 2 blocks over. And finally, Phoebe Levy, who I'd met maybe 3 times in 5 years of marriage. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "What's this about?" My wife gestured to the empty chair they'd positioned facing their little tribunal. "We've organized an intervention." I almost laughed. "An intervention? For what, exactly?" "For you," Clara said, consulting her notebook. "As your wife's support system, we've identified several areas where you need significant improvement as a husband." The word significant hung in the air like a challenge. I looked at my wife, waiting for her to say this was some kind of joke. Instead, she nodded seriously. "They've been helping me understand patterns I hadn't noticed before," she said. "Things that have been damaging our marriage." "Patterns," I repeated. Amber leaned forward. "We've prepared a comprehensive assessment based on months of observation and your wife's detailed accounts of your behavior." Months of observation. My wife had been documenting my life like I was a research subject. I could have walked out. Should have, probably. But something about the sheer audacity of the situation made me curious. 4 women had spent their Friday evening preparing to dissect my character. My wife had orchestrated this ambush with the precision of a military operation. I wanted to see exactly how far they'd go. "All right," I said, settling into the chair. "I'm listening." The satisfaction on their faces was unmistakable. They thought I was going to sit here and absorb their criticism like a scolded child. They had no idea what was coming. Clara opened her notebook like she was reading a verdict. "We'll start with household responsibilities," she announced. "Your wife has documented a clear pattern of neglect and inconsideration." I glanced at my wife. She was nodding along, completely serious. "For example," Amber continued, "you leave dishes in the sink overnight instead of loading the dishwasher immediately after dinner." "Sometimes I'll wash them by hand in the morning," I said. "That's not the point," Kinsley jumped in. "The point is consideration. Your wife shouldn't have to wake up to a messy kitchen." Phoebe consulted her own notes. "There's also the issue of laundry. You wait until weekends to do loads, which creates unnecessary stress for household management." I was starting to understand the scope of this operation. They hadn't just talked about me. They created a comprehensive case file. "Your wife has also shared concerns about your communication style," Clara continued. "You tend to withdraw instead of engaging in productive conversation." "Withdraw how?" "When she brings up important topics, you give short answers or change the subject," my wife said, speaking directly for the first time. "Like last month, when I wanted to discuss our vacation budget, I said we'd talk about it after I looked at our account balances, but you never brought it up again," Amber said triumphantly. "That's avoidance behavior. The pattern was becoming clear. Every normal human behavior had been reframed as a character flaw. Taking time to think before making financial decisions was avoidance. Doing chores on my own schedule was inconsiderate. Let's talk about your attitude towards social obligations, Kinsley said, flipping pages. Your wife feels embarrassed by your lack of enthusiasm for community events. I go to the events, I pointed out. But you don't participate meaningfully, Phoebe said. You stand by yourself. Check your phone. Leave early when possible. I'm not particularly social at parties. That reflects poorly on your wife, Clara said. People notice when a husband seems disinterested in his wife's social circle. My wife nodded emphatically. It makes me look like I married someone who doesn't care about the things that matter to me. The betrayal was starting to sink in. Every private conversation, every moment of vulnerability, every personal preference I'd shared with her had been dissected and presented as evidence of my inadequacy. But they were just getting started. Phoebe adjusted her glasses and turned to a new section of her notebook. The pages were color-coded. They'd actually color-coded their criticism of my life. Now we need to address some more personal matters, she said, with the tone of a prosecutor presenting key evidence. Your wife has been very brave in sharing some intimate details that demonstrate deeper issues. I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my expression neutral. Go ahead, I said quietly. Clara took over. Let's discuss your approach to romance and emotional intimacy. According to your wife, you've become complacent and predictable. My wife shifted in her chair, suddenly avoiding eye contact. But she didn't stop them. For instance, Amber continued, your anniversary last year. You made dinner reservations at the same restaurant you always go to, ordered the same wine you always order, and gave her jewelry again. No creativity, no effort to understand what would actually make her feel special. She likes that restaurant, I said, and she's always worn the jewelry I've given her. But does she feel truly seen and appreciated? Kinsley asked. Or does she feel like you're just going through the motions? My wife finally looked at me. I told them about the bracelet you gave me for Christmas. How it was beautiful, but it was the same style as every other piece. You never asked what I actually wanted. You never said you didn't like them. That's not the point, Clara said sharply. A husband should pay attention to his wife's preferences without being told. You should notice what makes her light up, what excites her, what she admires when you're out together. Amber leaned forward. Your wife mentioned that when you two watch movies together, you often fall asleep. Even during films she's specifically chosen because they mean something to her. I work 10-hour days. Sometimes I'm tired. But consider how that makes her feel, Phoebe said. She's trying to share something with you, to connect, and you literally lose consciousness. The attack continued for another 20 minutes. They dissected my performance as a provider, claiming I wasn't ambitious enough in my career. They criticized my friendships, suggesting I spent too much time with Barry Horn, my college roommate, because he was a negative influence who encouraged me to be complacent. Then Kinsley opened what appeared to be a separate folder entirely. Your wife has also shared some concerns about physical intimacy, she said. I felt the temperature in the room drop. I think that's private, I said firmly. Marriage problems affect the whole relationship, Clara replied, and your wife needs to feel supported in addressing these issues. My wife spoke up. I told them about how you never initiate conversations about what I need. You assume everything is fine, but you never actually ask. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. She discussed our private life with these women in enough detail that they felt qualified to counsel me about it. She's also mentioned, Amber said carefully, that you seem distracted sometimes, like your mind is elsewhere, even during intimate moments. Phoebe added, she feels like you're not fully present with her. I stared at my wife. She'd shared the most private aspects of our marriage with women who barely knew me, not just shared them, but framed them as evidence of my failure as a husband. These patterns all connect, Clara said, consulting her notes again. Emotional distance, lack of attentiveness, failure to prioritize her needs. It creates a cycle where she feels increasingly disconnected from you. Kinsley nodded. And when a wife feels disconnected, it affects every aspect of the relationship. Which brings us to your attitude problem, Amber said, turning to a new page. Your wife has documented several instances where you've been dismissive or condescending during important conversations. Like when we were discussing possibly refinancing the house, my wife said, I brought up concerns about the interest rates, and you said I was overcomplicating things because you were asking about rate, locks, and closing costs after looking at one article online. See, Clara pointed at me like I'd just proven her case. That's exactly the condescending tone she's talking about. Your wife is intelligent, Phoebe said. When she expresses concerns or asks questions, it comes from a place of caring about your shared future. But you treat her like she's bothering you with trivial matters. The systematic nature of this ambush was becoming clear. They'd taken months of normal marital interactions and reframed every single one as evidence of my character defects. Every time I'd been tired, distracted, busy, or simply human, it had been documented and analyzed, and my wife had been the primary source, feeding them ammunition. Clara closed her notebook with the satisfaction of someone who'd just delivered a closing argument. But apparently, they weren't done. Now that we've identified the core issues, she announced, we've developed a comprehensive action plan to help you become the husband your wife deserves. Amber pulled out a separate folder, this one thick with printed pages. We've researched therapists in the area who specialize in communication, skills, and emotional intelligence. Dr. Riley Farrell comes highly recommended, Kinsley added. He has a waiting list, but your wife has already called to get you on it. I looked at my wife. You've already contacted a therapist. I wanted to be proactive, she said. Once you commit to this process, we can move forward immediately. Phoebe consulted her own action plan. We've also identified some books that will help you understand your wife's emotional needs better. There's a whole section on mindful listening and responsive communication. The 5 love languages is a good starting point, my wife said. Though honestly, I think you'd benefit more from Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. In terms of immediate behavioral changes, Clara continued, we've created a daily checklist to help you build better habits. Amber handed me a laminated card. Laminated. They'd gone to Kinko's for this intervention. The checklist included items like ask your wife about her day and listen to her complete answer, and notice something specific to compliment her on. Complete one household task without being asked. This might seem basic, Kinsley said, but you need to rebuild the foundation of consideration and attentiveness. We've also scheduled some social activities where you'll have opportunities to practice being more engaged," Phoebe added. "There's a dinner party at Clara's house next weekend, and the community center is hosting a couples cooking class." My wife perked up. "I already signed us up for the cooking class. It'll be fun to learn something together." "The key is consistency," Clara said. "You can't just try for a week and then go back to old patterns." "Your wife has been patient for years while these problems festered." "Years?" I asked. "She's been trying to address these issues subtly for a long time," Amber explained, dropping hints, suggesting activities, "trying to guide you toward better habits. But subtle doesn't work with everyone." My wife nodded. "I kept hoping you'd notice I was unhappy, but you never picked up on the signals." "What signals?" "Like when I started doing all the grocery shopping alone instead of asking you to come," Kinsley said, reading from her notes. "Or when she stopped suggesting movie nights because you always fell asleep. Or when she bought new lingerie and you barely commented on it," Phoebe added. The humiliation was complete now. They'd catalog not just my failures, but my wife's attempts to compensate for them. Every time she'd withdrawn or changed her behavior, it had been a test I'd unknowingly failed. "The good news," Clara said, "is that these are all correctable behaviors. With commitment and the right guidance, you can learn to be the partner your wife needs." Dr. Farrell specializes in helping men understand their emotional blind spots, Amber said. "He'll help you see patterns you're not aware of." My wife reached across and touched my hand. "I know this feels overwhelming, but I love you. I want our marriage to work. That's why I asked them to help." "We're all invested in your success," Kinsley said. "Your wife is one of our closest friends, and we want to see her happy. Plus, strong marriages strengthen the whole community," Phoebe added. "When you become a better husband, it sets a positive example for other couples." Clara reopened her notebook to a final section. "We've also discussed some longer-term goals. Your wife has always wanted to take a European vacation, but you've been resistant to international travel." "It's expensive," I said, "but what message does that send?" Amber asked that you won't invest in experiences that matter to her. My wife squeezed my hand. "We could start planning something for next year. Maybe Italy. You know, I've always dreamed of seeing Rome." "The point is prioritization," Kinsley said. "Marriage requires ongoing investment, not just in terms of money, but in terms of energy and attention. Your wife shouldn't have to beg for romantic gestures or meaningful experiences," Phoebe said. "Those things should flow naturally from your love for her." Clara closed her notebook one final time. "So the question is, are you ready to commit to this process? Your wife has taken a huge step by organizing this intervention. She's put herself in a vulnerable position because she believes your marriage is worth fighting for." "We all believe it's worth fighting for," Amber added, "but the work has to come from you." The room fell silent. For women, and my wife stared at me expectantly, waiting for me to express gratitude for this ambush, to commit to their program of personality renovation, to accept their diagnosis of my fundamental inadequacy as a human being. I looked around the circle, taking in each face. Then I stood up slowly. "Thank you," I said calmly. "All of you. This has been incredibly enlightening." The smiles began to appear on their faces. They thought they'd won. "I mean it," I continued, my voice steady and clear. This has been absolutely invaluable. The clarity, the honesty, the sheer thoroughness of your assessment. You've given me exactly what I needed. My wife's smile widened. I knew once you heard it from other people, you'd understand. Oh, I understand perfectly now, I said, looking directly at her. You've all made something crystal clear that I was somehow missing before. Clara beamed. That's exactly why interventions work. Sometimes we're too close to our own problems to see them objectively. Exactly, I agreed. And I want you to know that I'm absolutely going to work on every single issue you've raised tonight. Every behavioral pattern, every communication flaw, every inadequacy you've so carefully documented. Amber practically glowed with satisfaction. That's the attitude that creates authentic change. I'm going to become more attentive, more romantic, more emotionally available, I continued. I'll learn to read subtle signals, prioritize romantic gestures, engage more meaningfully in social situations. This is wonderful, Phoebe said, clasping her hands together. I'll work on being fully present during intimate moments, asking the right questions, showing genuine interest in my partner's needs and desires, I said, my voice gaining strength. I'll become the man who notices what makes someone light up, who remembers preferences without being told, who creates surprises that show true understanding. Kinsley nodded enthusiastically. Now you're getting it. My wife reached for my hand again, tears forming in her eyes. I'm so proud of you for being open to this, and I promise you, I said, gently pulling my hand away, that I will work on every single one of these areas. I'll become more ambitious in my career, more creative in my romantic gestures, more engaged with my partner's social circle. The room was silent now, everyone hanging on my words. I'll become the husband who plans meaningful vacations, who stays awake during movies that matter to his wife, who asks about her day and listens to the complete answer. The man who compliments specifically, who notices new lingerie, who makes his partner feel truly seen and appreciated. That's all we wanted, Clara said softly. I will become that man, I said firmly, in my next relationship, because this one just ended. The silence that followed was deafening. My wife's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, then comprehension. What? You heard me correctly, I said, my voice calm but final. I'm going to work on every single flaw you've identified tonight, but I'll be doing it with someone who doesn't coordinate public humiliations with her friends. Wait, Amber said, her voice shaking slightly. That's not what this was about, wasn't it? I looked around the circle. 4 women spent their Friday evening dissecting my character, based on months of detailed reports from my wife about my private behavior, my intimate moments, my personal insecurities. What would you call that? We were trying to help, Kinsley said weakly, by ambushing me with a laminated checklist and a pre-selected therapist. I asked, by discussing my performance in bed with women I barely know. My wife stood up abruptly. You're overreacting. This was an intervention, not an attack. An intervention for what, exactly? I asked her directly. For being tired sometimes. For having normal human flaws. For not being a mind reader. For taking me for granted, she said, her voice rising. By working 10 hours a day to pay our bills. By doing laundry on weekends instead of weekdays. By falling asleep during movies after those 10-hour days. Clara tried to interrupt. Maybe we should take a break and discuss this more calmly. There's nothing to discuss, I said firmly. This conversation is over. All of you can leave now. You can't just kick us out, Phoebe said indignantly. Actually, I can. This is my house. I pay the rent. And I'm asking you to leave. My wife stepped between me and her friends. Don't you dare speak to them that way. They came here to help us. They came here to help you humiliate me, I corrected. And you orchestrated it. You documented my behavior like I was a lab rat, shared our intimate life with strangers, and then ambushed me with their judgment. I shared with my support system because I felt alone in this marriage, she said, tears flowing now. Then you should have talked to me about feeling alone. Instead, you talked to everyone else. The four women were gathering their notebooks and folders, the atmosphere now thick with tension and embarrassment. This is exactly the kind of defensive reaction that proves you need help, Clara said as she headed for the door. What it proves, I said, is that I have more self-respect than you gave me credit for. As they filed out, each woman shot me looks of disapproval and disgust. My wife followed them to the door, whispering urgent conversations I couldn't hear. When she came back into the living room, her face was flushed with anger. You just humiliated me in front of my friends, she said. I just refused to be humiliated by yours, I replied. There's a difference. The next morning, I woke up on the couch. My wife had locked herself in our bedroom after our confrontation, and I decided not to push the issue. I needed time to think anyway. By 7 a.m., I was already on the phone with Simon Levy, a divorce attorney Barry had recommended months ago during his own separation. I'd never thought I'd need the number, but apparently my subconscious had been paying attention. I can see you Monday morning, Simon said after I explained the situation. Bring any financial documents you have access to, and don't sign anything until we talk. My wife emerged from the bedroom around 9, her eyes red from crying. She'd clearly spent the night alternating between anger and panic. We need to talk about last night, she said, settling into the chair across from me. What's to talk about? You can't seriously be ending our marriage over one conversation. One conversation. I sat down my coffee and looked at her directly. You spent months documenting my behavior like evidence for a court case. You shared intimate details of our marriage with women who don't even like me.